Who is your daddy and what does he do? Kill frogs. Okay, so I'm mixing metaphors or movies or whatever. I love to mix metaphors. I'm not sure why, but we're gonna go with it. Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? In this long, drawn-out conversation I've been having with Runeslinger, we talked about some things today that were of interest to me, and I mentioned the fact that, as I watched some of the discussions that happened, like on the Facebook Brigade page, for example, I think it was Lee Rimmer actually put down a video about who am I, and there was quite a discussion on the Facebook page about it. And so people like Complex Games Apologist and Drudenfoots and Runeslinger had quite a long discussion. A bunch of, like Robert Necronomicon, I think, was involved with that, and a bunch of people. Can't name them all. But there's these times, I mentioned to him, that I feel stupid as I'm reading this discussion, because people are having some thinking deep thinks, and discussing great thoughts and things that I hadn't thought of, or maybe expressing themselves a little bit more eloquently or what have you. So that's neither here nor there. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but there are moments where I just feel a little bit stupid. But I do enjoy, like, when I or somebody else drops something, an idea, and then the discussion kind of unfolds, after that. So, be that as it may, what am I going to talk about today? One of the part of the discussion we were having today, at some point we were talking about a bunch of different things, and I said, I wonder sometimes when asking myself, am I more gamist or narrativist or simulationist? I have to ask, like, about what part of the game. Depends on the game, or depends on the part or the facet of the game. And he said, well, don't ask that. Ask what games you like and what those games do. Kill frogs. So I figured that's kind of a worthy thing to think about. So as I was at the gym today, trying to burn off all this fat, I thought about this a little bit. And so I came up with a few things that I'll just kind of share briefly. And this is kind of like one of those things I hope just kind of leads to more discussion in general. Because, I'll tell you what, I was not a huge fan of the big model and the gamist, narrativist, simulationist school of thought. But, I've decided, well, what the heck, I'll try it on for size. And, it's like all models, it's a model. And it's a jumping off point for discussion and, game experience. And what do you prefer? And, no matter what people say in terms of what their game preference is, that's cool for them. That's awesome. So I remember when we were having this discussion about the Quantum Ogre very recently, many different posters posted all kinds of stuff and made some videos about it. And some of the, I guess we'll call them old timers, had some different perspectives. And, I'm not going to argue with that. That's awesome. I mean, because I've certainly played in games like that. Anyhow, I am digressing once again. So let me get on with this. It's funny, though, I did say to Runeslinger that at some point, as people are pontificating and talking back and forth, and these long paragraphs about the theory, at some point I say to myself, all that is very well, but we must cultivate our garden. Or, my vernacular is like, that's great, we're going to check for wandering monsters now because you've been talking far too long. Or, what does your character do now? Can we get back to that? So that probably sheds some light on what I particularly like. But anyhow, I asked myself, what do I like about games, the games that I like? And so this is just a short list. It's probably very incomplete. But I do like, not surprisingly, fast, simple task resolution. I like a game where the differences in ability or proficiency in different characters are reflected in a simple and meaningful manner, mechanically, without breaking down into like absurdity. I talked about that in some other video about absurd results in some mechanical systems. But I don't care necessarily what the system is as long as it's meaningful and it's simple. Let's see. I like a cinematic and abstract injury system. This is kind of what we were talking about today when I asked, well, about what part of the game. And this is no surprise if you watched my channel. I've talked about this a few times. I think he referenced a falling damage blog post, very recent one by somebody. And I've had some experiences with injuries. I injured the heck out of my elbow back in 2009. Had from a 10-foot fall, had an 18-month heal time on that thing. But part of the deals with like trauma. I don't want to digress too far into any of these preferences of mine. Is that same injury or same incident really, not same injury. One person can walk away and be a little bruised. One person can have an injury that creeps up and gives them some trouble for a couple of weeks. Some person can have this long protracted heal time, and some person is out of the game forever. And to me, if we simulated that to the degree that it is in real life, first of all, we need huge charts and tables. He said, well, how about Rollmaster? But second of all, how do I explain, to the two guys at the table? I explain to Al and John. Okay, well, Al, you both fell 10 feet or 50 feet, and John gets up, and he dusts himself off, and he's got a little bit of a limp, but he'll be okay. He got a broken finger, and your character, well, you have to have both your legs amputated. But that's what happens in real life. So anyhow, I prefer the more cinematic, and I don't care how that happens. I was thinking about it today. Even though like I like the whole D&D hit point, I'm okay with that system because that's what I grew up with, and it is you can view those injuries in more of a cinematic nature and say, okay, well, they're not real injuries until the end. Something like Ubiquity, where you use style points to mitigate damage, okay, or use style points just to get yourself out of that position in the first place. It's kind of doing the same thing. It's a different way to skin a cat, but I'm gonna leave that alone. I like middle of the road powered characters. I mean, I do like the zero to hero progression that a lot of games offer, but when it comes down to like what do I want to be playing, characters that aren't, they're not too squishy, but they're not superheroes unless we're playing a supers game. I prefer that kind of vibe just in the game in general, not like what part of the game or what level I want to play. That's kind of how the game is. They're a little bit larger in life, but they're not superheroes. Let's see, a setting that does not confine creativity. My world. So whatever setting it is, I want there to be some wiggle room. I don't want it to be so clearly defined. I've certainly talked about that in the past, but I was never a big fan of playing in something like, say, Greyhawk. I mean, I've done it, but I never wanted to run it because it wasn't my world. So any game where it's so rigid, I get less interested. And it's funny because I'm all pumped about playing All for One, Regime Diabolique, where there's an established setting. I mean, there's wiggle room, but it's 30 Years' War of France and all that kind of stuff. There are tropes you have to kind of align yourself with, as opposed to something like I'm just as interested, but I'm more hot about playing that than something like Leagues of Adventure, which is a little bit more open-ended. Still a different time period, but you can kind of play around with it a little bit more. Anyhow, I like real risk and reward, real consequences. And whatever we're doing, I like it to be realistic in that regard. Cinematic when it comes to injury, but I do like choices and stuff to be meaningful. I like the world to be, logical. Absence of illogical events or inconsistencies. And this could be in something as simple as, I remember there's a game, I think it was Pathfinder, and they had this progression for assassins. And at some point, now, keep in mind, assassins are not supposed to be magical. They're guys that kill people. But at some point, maybe it's a feat tree you have to take or whatever, when you assassinate somebody, your opponent crumbles into dust and cannot be resurrected. Crumbles into dust. Okay, that's magical, dude. Okay, at that point, I'm done. With stuff like that, just breaks it for me. I like complete freedom in terms of I like a player-driven game, and so I don't like games that necessarily have to force you into something. And even if it's just kind of like we're going to do this story arc, that doesn't do it for me because what if I want? And understand that they're not all railroads. They're not, but what if I want to jump? What if I see something over there that looks shiny and I'm going to go over there and I don't care what the story arc is? And I like that freedom. I like players driving the game. I like for us to be driving the bus and determining what's going on. But I like that to be expressed through the actions of our characters. I'm less interested in sitting down and saying, okay, we're going to have this sort of game or this sort of, not necessarily this sort of game, but this, this is kind of the story arc I want to have, or I want to develop this, or, we want a game about. No, I want a world that is what it is, and then we jump into it, and then we go and make our fortunes. I like that. Or, I like my players to do the same thing. Here's the world, here's what's going on in the world. What do you do? Okay? We must cultivate our garden now, okay? What are you going to do? And let's see, last but not least, and it's definitely, probably not last, really, in terms of my preferences, I like rules that facilitate play, and then just get the heck out of the way. I'm less of a fan of rules that kind of inform play in one way or another. And this could be something like, the whole, I hate to call it power game, but the whole, feat trees that you find in, D20 type games would get very detailed and very crunchy in that manner. Or, a game that has some kind of, mechanics in terms of, personality. There's definitely some games that look intriguing to me where you face moral dilemmas, and this is, now how your character thinks, but I don't like that as much. So, but what else I want is the rules to be there, inform what the play is going to be like to a certain extent. Okay, we've got a problem, we've got an impasse. Okay, let's resolve this. Then get the heck out of the way. Let's get back to being people in a, dynamic world, seeking our fortunes. I like that. So what does that make me? I'm not sure what the heck that makes me in terms of the big model, but I like games that are like that. And in terms of playing with people, I like, even though I've had a lot of experience in the beer and pretzels type game. You know what I mean by that is there's not so much beer and pretzels at the table, but it's kind of like Devil May Care. Let's just go roll some dice and have some fun. That can be fun, but that's not really what I'm after. I've had my most fun in the games where really the players are really chomping at the bit and saying, what can we do here in this world? And not so much like looking at their character sheet and say, oh, well, okay, well, here's my abilities, and okay, I'm going to use this. But it doesn't interest me. It doesn't interest me flipping through books, looking for the cool level of feats or powers. My character in All for One, notwithstanding, with that cool double maneuver. I couldn't resist that one. But you know what I mean? So, what kind of games do you like? What games do you like? What about them do you like? What do they do that makes that does it for you, or not do? So, it's Super Bowl night. Nobody's probably gonna watch this video. I'm not sure if it made any sense. I probably said and too much, but those are my crosses to bear out of many. But have a good night. I'll talk to you later.